Break free from society's myths about masculinity and live with purpose.
Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
Hey everyone, today we have Michael Taylor on the show. Michael is a life coach, speaker, and best-selling author who's overcome divorce, bankruptcy, and homelessness. Michael helps men redefine masculinity by breaking down the 5 illusions of manhood. Today, he'll share how men can embrace emotions, build better relationships, and find real success. Welcome, Michael.
Man, I am super excited to be here with you guys because I got to tell you, I've been doing this work for about 25 years. It's extremely difficult to get men to engage in these types of conversations. So I'm always excited when I find other men who are having this dialogue.
Amen, brother. Amen. So we are indeed excited to have you on the show, excited to get into this conversation about those very things. And yes, this is something that Will and I are very passionate about. And now that I just mentioned Will, brother, good to see you, man. How are you?
We're back. Good to see you, John. Michael, you're in the right place. Like we do this every week. Talk about men stuff, men shit all the time. Trying to break down, you know what I mean? And it's like men are good people. Okay, I think it's just what we should say all the time. Like men are good people. Anyway, we'll get into that a little bit later. But hey, just a couple of announcements. Dive into Men Talking Mindfulness by hitting up our website, mentalkingmindfulness.com, or simply text 3377. Simply text MTM to the number 33777. And what you'll find out is we have something coming up. We're launching in November the Men Talking Mindfulness Social Fitness Club. It's a way for us to connect as a community, talk about our latest episodes, and raise more mindfulness and more emotional intelligence. So be on the lookout for that. And hey, we're going to do our just one breath grounding practice. So you can do this wherever you are. We're just going to take one big breath to remind us that our breath really makes a big difference in how we're showing up, or can make a difference in how we're showing up. So sit up tall, maybe close those eyes. If you're driving, I suggest not closing your breath. Okay. We'll just start with a nice little exhale out your mouth. Get really empty, pull the navel in and push all that breath out. And let's take one big giant inhale down into your belly as best you possibly can. Bigger, bigger. Keep going all the way to the top of the chest. Let's hold that breath, top it off a little bit through the nose, and let it go out through the mouth. Empty, 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 empty. Fantastic. And hey, everyone that's listening, thank you for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for sharing our podcast, helping us grow and becoming more mindful. All right, Michael, let's jump in. So, doing our research on you, we've seen and read and that you've been through some serious life challenges like divorce, bankruptcy, homelessness, and more. So what was the turning point that kind of sparked your transformation into a life coach and into a thought leader?
Well, as mentioned, at the age of 23, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids, and all of that. And by society standards, I was pretty successful. And within about 6.5 year time frame, that dream turned into a nightmare. Once again, divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, a deep, deep state of depression where I even contemplated taking my own life. I was homeless for 2 years, living out of my car.
Wow.
And during those dark periods of my life, I asked myself a simple question. What does it mean to be a man? Because I had done everything I thought a man was supposed to do to be happy, and I was absolutely miserable. And I couldn't.
You're fucking homeless. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
I couldn't figure out. I said, this doesn't make sense because I played by the societal playbook, right? Doing what I was supposed to do. Well, as a result of that question, I began what I'll call my journey of transformation. And I started reading self-help books, started listening to audio programs, and I just took a deep, deep dive into figuring out what it meant to be a man. And again, this is a 30-something year journey that I've been on and I continue to be on today. But what I realized was when I started rebuilding my life, I wanted to share the lessons that I had learned along the way. And so I started writing. And it actually, my writing began after gaining the courage to go to therapy and to start journaling. And when I started journaling, I started connecting with who I am, my getting in touch with how I felt and being able to express that. And I said, you know what? I actually have a gift for writing. And I just started writing books back in 1995. And so here we are, some 25 years later. I'm still coaching men, empowering men through books, seminars, workshops, courses, and so forth.
Nice. Well, excuse me. Like you said right before we hit record, Michael, you said, hey, we're all feeling the allergies. So I've got some going on still. It's been a while. But hey, I want to know, like, how do you go from being homeless, living in your car, to actually writing? Like, how does that process even work? Like, hey, you go to, a publisher and you're like, hey, man, I've been living out of my car. Here's what I've been writing in the back seat. Will you publish this? Like, how do you go from living in the car to where you're publishing books?
Well, first of all, I have to acknowledge that I believe that there is a divine intelligence that created this universe, and I have access to that intelligence. So I am absolutely certain that this intelligence is the source of everything for me. So I begin there.
Beautiful.
But here's a great story. So back in the 90s, again, when I was kind of rebuilding my life and I wanted to write this book, back then we didn't really have the internet so much. So what you had to do is you had to send query letters to publishing companies, and then they would send you back a letter if they were interested, and then you'd go from there, right? I sent my manuscript to 60 different publishers.
Wow.
I got 59 rejections. The last one, and I had it all documented, the last one sends me a letter, says, look, I'm interested. Give me a call. So I call this company, and the lady says, look, I loved your book. Now, the title of the book was Brothers, Are You Listening? A Success Guide for the 90s, targeted specifically to Black men. So he says, I loved your book, but she says, please don't take this the wrong way, but our research shows Black men don't really buy these types of books.
Oh, wow.
And she said, would you be willing to change the title? Oh. She says, if we change the title, she says, I know I could sell this book. Now, at the time, I could have really used that little advance. It was probably $2,500 or whatever. But there was a part of me that said, that's like asking a father to change his child's name. I said,
wow.
Whole journey has been about me wanting to empower Black men. I can't do that. Right. And so I said, look, I'll have to pass. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. And so I went to a bookstore, and I was walking through this bookstore, and I see this book, and it's titled The Gas We Pass, right? It was about It was about farting, right? But here's the thing. God. When I looked at the publisher, it was one of the publishing companies that had rejected my book.
Oh, wow.
And I got pissed. I was like, shit, you'd rather publish a book about farting?
Wow.
And I said, okay, I got this. I'm going to figure this out. So I actually got a job at a bookstore to learn the publishing industry.
Oh, wow.
Number one, I knew I wanted to get my book out there, but I was really ticked off. These guys would publish that book and not mine. So that was kind of a funny part, but I was really pissed. So that's how I got into the publishing industry. I got a job in the bookstore. I learned the industry, started self-publishing, and now here I am some 25 years later, have published 16 books of my own, have published several for people, and have my own publishing company.
Oh, man, congrats.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that. It's phenomenal that you've done that. But also, like, I can understand, please don't take this the wrong way, Michael, but I can almost understand, the publishing companies, you're writing this book about success as you're homeless in the back of your car. Like, how did you explain that? Like, where are they even sending this? Or I'm sorry to belabor this point, but I'm just so curious.
Yeah, no, but actually at that point I had gotten an apartment. I was actually living in an apartment. And interesting thing, in the apartment, the only thing I had was an air mattress.
That's the way, man. I've done that.
All the communication I was doing was I'd go to the library, and that's how I contacted these, found out.
Wow. Good for you.
So
good for you, man. That's resilience right there. Like getting knocked down and getting back up and finding, like clawing your way back to where you are today. That's awesome. Well, congratulations.
Yeah. The gift of adversity, right? For sure.
Oh, that's right.
And I bet that book, The Ford, was written by Howard Stern. The Gas We Pass. I'm just kidding. Remember Howard Stern? Fucking man?
That's
anyway,
right.
He's hilarious. Yeah. But let's go. So let's dive into some of the men's work. So, why? And please tell us, like, hopefully, because I'm wondering myself all the time, like, why are men getting so beat up these days, and why are we being blamed for so many problems?
Well, first of all, let me say this: I am an optimist. Matter of fact, my tagline says, "I am an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible." Okay,
there you go. Nice.
So, for me, the lens through which I see it. There's a woman named Barbara Marx Hubbard who wrote an amazing book called Conscious Evolution. And in the book, she theorizes that human beings are still evolving. Now, I personally believe that's true. And when it comes to men and masculinity, we live in a society that focuses so much on negativity and sensationalism and that those types of things. Their primary driver is negativity. But despite what we're seeing in the media, I believe men are actually waking up. And I believe men are at a point where they're going, you know what? The old ways of being and relating as men no longer work. Now, a lot of that is being driven by women. So a lot of people don't realize that in this country's history, for the first time, there are more women in the workforce than men. There are more women graduating from college than men. If you look at politics, you look at education, women are just killing it, right? Well, a lot of men see that as a threat because they're like, where do we fit in? So I believe what's happening is it's simply a changing of roles. And the roles of manhood and masculinity are changing dramatically. So, for example, I remember when I first started writing, I went to the bookstore, and this again is in the early 90s. And there were very few books about manhood and masculinity.
I bet there are very, very few, if any, man. I'm surprised you found any.
There was Iron John. You guys remember Iron John?
I don't.
Iron John was one of the first that kind of started the men's movement by a guy named Robert Bly. There was another book called Fire in the Belly by a guy named Sam Keene, which is an introduction to men's work. But now, if you look at online and go to the bookstore, now there's a gazillion resources for men. So to your point, despite what mainstream media is showing, I'm extremely optimistic because men don't have a choice. We have to evolve. We have to change. And having these types of conversations can support us in that change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what about getting beat up? Like, what are we getting beat up for? Like, what are we getting blamed for? Like, why are we, honestly, I'm going to sound frustrated. Like, why are we the fucking problem? Like, I don't understand. Like, we want connection, love, and belonging, and a good life and happiness and good relationships, just like anybody else, but I don't know why we're getting so shit on nowadays. Granted, like, I'm in my little bubble, I'm an entrepreneur. I work with Jon. I work with other group of people that I enjoy. So I'm not in the corporate culture where it's like, I can only imagine, you're working your butt off, you're doing great jobs, and someone gets promotion over you just because you're a man and they're somebody else. So help us out there.
But what drives the media? Stories
about the media? Is it really the media? I mean, like, yes, it definitely could be the media. This whole patriarchy bullshit, I gotta say, I think it's just absolute BS. It's just I think it portrays like a victim mentality instead of picking yourself up and putting your best foot forward and forget it. Anytime you play a victim narrative, like, what are you doing? You're like blaming everyone else for your problems instead of looking at yourself in the mirror and be like, hey, I'm the problem.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Will. I mean, aren't you doing that right now? Saying that everybody else is the problem? I mean, like...
Well, I mean, I'm sticking up for men right now. You know what I mean? We're having a conversation about...
I love you, brother.
I know, I'm with you. I know I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting emotional. Now I'm getting reactive. You know what I mean? Plus, I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm a little, cranky. But help me out here, Michael. I think I need a little bit of your wisdom.
But again, think about it. So what makes headlines, right? Rape, domestic violence.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. If it bleeds, it leads. So the media is constantly focusing on the negative aspects of men. But again, my belief is that we as men, we can move past negative media by creating platforms like this. Because it's platforms like this that can give men the tools to begin looking at themselves differently. Because if you pay attention to CNN and Fox News, what are you going to see? Right. You gotta break away from that stuff. You gotta understand that you have the capacity, the ability to transform your life, but it'll never happen if you're paying attention to the mainstream media.
Right. Or playing the victim. It's never going to happen if you're playing the victim or blaming somebody else for your problems instead of like looking yourself in the mirror and being like, wait, I'm responsible for my life, and there definitely, there are people that are victim of certain circumstances. But if you keep living those circumstances again and again and again, and not seeing the opportunity that might be within that particular circumstance that didn't work out for you, then you're just going to keep, coming back to, like everyone else the problem instead of like, you know what, I'm the solution and the problem.
Well, for me, as I mentioned earlier, I believe there is a divine intelligence, right? This divine intelligence I have access to. And as a former atheist who used to cringe when people would even say the word God, I would just reject, completely shut down, couldn't hear a word they were saying. But I have come to know that through my mindfulness practice, through connecting with that higher source, divine intelligence, it is what has given me the courage to go past what society says. And as a man who happens to be Black, do you think it's difficult as a white dude?
Well played.
Yeah.
I get pushed back from Black folks because I'm an optimist.
Right.
Wow.
Imagine that. There you go.
You don't understand racism. You know, and I'm like, seriously? And you talk about responsibility, right? It's about really being responsible. And for me, again, it begins with me and my connection to something greater than myself and being willing to trust my own mind and heart to guide me and not the media.
Nice.
Excellent.
Well, I talked about those 5 illusions of manhood at the beginning. Can you walk us through what these illusions are, and then kind of, if you would, explain how they shape society's expectations of men?
Absolutely. So again, after asking myself that simple question, what does it mean to be a man? I started doing my own personal research about manhood and masculinity. And I came up with these 5 illusions. And what I've discovered is these 5 illusions are basically the groundwork for most pain and suffering in a man's life. Because when we're trapped in these illusions, we will never fully grasp who we truly are as human beings, and we'll be blindsided by all this societal and cultural conditioning. So illusion number 1, and this is the most destructive one, is to be a man, you must be non-emotional and disconnected.
Yeah.
We live in a culture, a society that says feelings are for women. Men aren't supposed to express emotion. Men aren't supposed to feel. So the only permission we have to express the feeling is anger.
Right.
If a man's anger, he's just a man.
Yeah, but we've talked about that on the show before. That's the only acceptable behavior of men is anger. Everything else has to be stoic, or hey, you just do it behind closed doors if you do it at all. So I love that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No. So for a man to say, you know what, I'm really scared right now. I'm scared of, and I remember when I was going through my divorce, I didn't have that support system to say, I'm terrified of what's going to happen to my kids. And so being willing to express the sadness, of going through a divorce and losing everything. I remember sitting down one night after losing my kids, and I just broke down, and it was just almost unbearable because I loved my kids so much, but I didn't have, number one, I wasn't open and honest enough to even share this with anybody, first of all.
Right.
I was in my little bubble, just crying my eyes out, trying to figure out how to fix everything, but I didn't know the importance of having a support system to talk about some of these things. So that illusion is what keeps men, because I believe the 3 most difficult words for any man to say are, I need
help.
Oh, yeah. Or I'm sorry. But I am help. I would rank number 1. Yes.
Oh, for sure. Oh, man.
Once again, because as men, we've been conditioned that we aren't supposed to feel. We're supposed to be tough and, we're supposed to be rigid and all of that. But see, that's what's causing so much pain and suffering in our lives, because we don't give ourselves permission to feel and to express those feelings. So that's illusion number one.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
And the result of that, and I have to share this story because after my divorce, I really struggled with relationships. And what would happen was the relationship would last 2 to 3 weeks, and the women were all saying the same thing as they left. Here's what they would say. Oh, I care too much about you to stay in this relationship. How much sense does that make? You care about me, but you're leaving, right? But then they would say this. The main reason I'm leaving is because you're emotionally unavailable.
Oh, wow.
And at the time, it didn't make sense to me, because my argument was, I'm a good guy. I believe in monogamy. I'm not running the streets. I'm a provider, all those things. But I didn't know how to connect emotionally. Now, I had a bunch of stuff that I needed to deal with, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I had to be willing to look at that. But that whole illusion is that men aren't supposed to be emotional. And so I was completely shut down emotionally, and that's why I couldn't connect with women. So that was illusion number one. So I'll leave it open for you if you got a question, and then we'll jump to the next illusion.
Oh, that's a good one. And I felt that too. Like I went through divorce. I'm on my second marriage. I did not have kids, so I can only imagine how that complicates things and adds to the fear, which is, a feeling, right? You're feeling that fear, feeling sadness on top of it, feeling like a failure, right? I know that's a big one for men, but we don't want to express any of those. So because expressing those will even compound on that feeling of failure. Oh, I'm expressing sadness, or not even just expressing it, feeling it. I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling fear, and therefore I am a failure. So it's just this downward spiral. So I fully believe that is an impossible thing to do, and that is an illusion that we teach society. And I've got a young boy I've got a young son, and there at one point, Will and I have talked about this before. There was a part in me that was like, when he was crying, and he was much younger than he is now, I'll be like, "Hey, man, boys don't cry," and that's just which I've since changed, and I know I have evolved, and thankfully he's growing through that, and he cries now. I mean, he cries when he's hurt, he cries when he's sad, but he also just cries. He just cries, which is totally fine. So sorry, I digress, brother.
But here's the thing. The most overwhelming feeling for me was shame.
Oh, for most men, I feel that too.
It was the shame of going through a divorce and feeling like a failure. Boy, that was just, it was like, man, I can't even put into words the shame. And there's a guy named John Bradshaw wrote an amazing book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. And it really helped me identify and deal with that toxic shame, he calls it. But that's something that we as men don't talk about. I mean, that shame was just, it's as if, it's a feeling of there's something wrong with me inherently. There's, I'm defective in some way. Right. So it's a really powerful feeling that will drive negative behavior. So that's that. So illusion number two is, to be a man, you must use sexual conquest as a gauge for manhood.
Right? That's not true? I'm sorry. That's my younger self speaking. I'm sorry.
You need to evolve some, Will.
But think about it. I saw things somewhere on social media or something that said that men think about sex every 15 seconds or something crazy. I'm like, seriously? If something wrong with me, I don't think about sex that much. Maybe when I was 15.
Right.
But there's this illusion in our society and culture that as men, our job is to sleep with as many women as possible.
Right.
And we run around trying to get these notches on our belts, to
bragging
prove
about
our manhood and masculinity.
Yeah.
And we got to change that. And so it is that illusion that also drives things like rape, right? Because these men are trying to validate themselves through sex. Because number one, they feel so bad about themselves. It's really more about power and control. And for them, they're like saying, okay, well, I'm a man, so I'll go out and have sex with somebody. So if she won't give it to me, I'm going to take it. Well, It's driven by that illusion.
It's also objectifies women too, so they don't become a person anymore. They just become an object of desire.
Right.
And that's where, I mean, and I'll say, and I'll eat some of my words earlier. Like that is a fucking problem for men, I mean, and, so we could be beat up for that. But I mean, I think there's a lot of objectification out there. It's not just men. I know that, I mean, for sure. I mean, I live in New York City. There's fucking millions of people here. Like there's a lot of objectification going on both sides. But thank you for number two. Mike.
And also what's driving that is, you guys familiar with pickup culture, right?
I read the game.
Yeah, these young kids are sitting out there trying to teach young men how to just have sex with women, right? And of course, with social media and Tinder and all these different apps, and these guys are sitting here trying to just have sex, and they wonder why they're so miserable. They wonder why they're so unhappy, because they're trying to. Exactly. Empty is a great word.
I can't help but think of this one guy. So, Michael, I'm a retired Navy SEAL, and in training, there was a guy named Dan. Let me see if I get this right. Dan Bilzerian. And if you ever look this guy up on Instagram, he has like 35 million followers. He got kicked out of training because he was a complete dirtbag. And I hope that he hears this, because I do feel that he's a complete dirtbag. But his Instagram is nothing but him and all these scantily clad women surrounding him. And I feel bad for the young men who get on Instagram and see that and think that that is a way of living. Because I can guarantee you that guy, Dan Bilzerian, is empty. He has no depth to him. He has no sense of fulfillment, because that's all he's doing is he's trying to prove himself. He's trying to prove to others that he's this conqueror, that he's this dominating human being. But I think he's also trying to hide some deep insecurities. Sorry, I'm getting on a serious soapbox, with anti-Dan Bilzerian soapbox. But hey, if you're right now. Oh my gosh, it's disgusting. It's disgusting. And if you're listening to this and you're watching it, check out Dan Bilzerian, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I mean, he's famous for taking this young lady nude and grabbing her by the crotch and throwing her off of a building into a pool. That's one of the, So anyway, I digress. But yes, I can definitely see that. I mean, I thought that at one point was, hey, I have to sleep with as many girls as I can. And now there's, complete transparency. There's many times I wish I hadn't done that. Many times I wish I hadn't done those particular instances or been a part of that. Right. So, I feel that next illusion for sure.
Yeah. And we all get trapped in them, Well,
I mean,
I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as younger men, we don't have guidance. We're also raised in a way that we're cut off from our emotions, and one of the ways that we rise in the pecking order, right, is through sexual conquest, so therefore sexual conquest and objectifying women is part of the masculine culture at that point in our lives, plus we're jacked up on testosterone, and we also want to be, this is a way, sadly, and it's not a great way, but it is a way that we connect with other men, mm-hmm. and it's a weak connection, but it definitely is some sort of connection. I mean, I've been there. I mean, my God, I went, through college, through my 20s, like, through my 30s. And it was like, plus, it goes very well with how, the drinking culture that we're a part of, and party culture that a lot of us are part of. And like, it's all about sex, and, and women do this too. I mean, women look up for conquesting sexually as well. But like, we really, take it on the chin once again. So I'm eating my words, once again, I'm digressing. I'm digressing, but guys,
I would say that, if women do it, I think for the most part, they hide it, and or if they do it, they are looked upon as loose, as sluts, as everything else. Whereas men are like, "Oh, good job, congratulations, conqueror, high fives." Yeah. So there's definitely a double standard there. But I want to move on from this illusion to the next three, just based on time. But so we've talked about, the fact that we can't have emotions as men, and sexual conquest kind of defines us as men. So those are two of the 5 illusions. What are the other 3?
Number 3, to be a man, you must have money and material possessions. Now, here's the thing. Absolutely nothing wrong with making money.
I like money.
Don't hear that at all. But unfortunately, what happens is, as men, we hide behind our stuff.
Oof, yeah.
If you look at mainstream media and you see successful, what do you see? You see cars, you see
houses,
vacations, stuff, right?
Ladies. Yeah.
And so as men, what we think is that if I just have enough money, I'll validate myself as a man.
Right.
But you got tons of men that's got millions of dollars, as the guy you probably mentioned earlier, got all the money, but are absolutely miserable. So the problem is we hide behind our stuff. For example, I don't know if you guys saw this. It was going on social media. This woman refused to go on a date with a guy because he wanted to take a cheesecake factory. Did you get that?
Yes, I did see that. Yeah.
Wait, I'm sorry, that he wouldn't go? That he wouldn't
that he was going to. That's where he was.
She would not go on a date with him because he wanted to take her to Cheesecake Factory. Okay? So here's the problem I see it as men. Too many times what we want to do is we go on a very first date, and what we want to do, we want to impress the woman. So what do? We take them to a fancy restaurant. We buy some nice, we do all these things to impress a woman, which is basically saying, you might not like me, but you'll like my stuff. Right? We hide behind our stuff, right? In our material possession. So what I'm suggesting for men is you can get to a place where you are so comfortable in your own skin, you don't need stuff to know that you are lovable.
Yeah.
You don't need anything outside of yourself to be lovable.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge for a lot of men because they try to hide behind their stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Michael, I just want to draw a thread here. You said it earlier, the media, and it's not just the media that drives these first 3, right? You must be completely stoic. Stoic in the sense of like unemotional, sexual conquest, money and power, right? And the expression and the illusion and the outward, portrayal of those things. But look at the way, look what we see on TV, look what we see in the movies, look at the people that are typically elevated in the media very often. They're not having these kind of conversations about like emotional maturity and like, and like being a good man and really stepping into your own power by being a man that is fully in control of his emotions, but also has a whole, library of feelings that they're able to express. So they're definitely, it's strange. Like there's a lot of, I hate that all these things work against us. But thank you for bringing this up. So let's go move to number 4. Yeah.
Real quick. I just want to touch on, that whole thing. Don't worry. I'm not going back to Dan Bilzerian. Jim Carrey, I'm going to mess the quote up, but he said something about, I wish everyone could be rich, or I wish everyone could get rich and famous. Yeah. Just for once, right? Just for a brief period. So they would know that is not the way. That's not the answer. That's not going to give them fulfillment. But everybody thinks it. Everybody's like, if I could just be rich, if I could just make another $1,000, another $1 million, if I could just get another car. I fully admit it. And we've talked about this before. As soon as I got my truck, which is a nice truck, and I drive, I love it. I love it. But I drive it down the road. I'm like, ooh, that's a nice truck too. I wish I had that one. I'm like, come on, John. This is the hedonic cycle, right? Is that in that what it's called? Something like that. Probably screwed that up too. But anyhow, okay. So illusion 3 is that we hide behind, or we have to have money, right? We have to have money
and power. And once again, nothing wrong with having stuff.
Yeah.
Illusion number 4 is to be a man, you must have titles, positions, and power. So we live in a society that says a man with a PhD is somehow a better man than a man with a GED. That's not true. He may have more education, but that doesn't necessarily make him a better man. Now, the downside of that is, and what I find in some of my coaching clients is, men that don't have degrees feel inadequate. Well, they don't feel like they're good enough because they don't have titles and labels.
Right.
And so helping men move past that, say, look, dude, you have to learn to love yourself as you are. You don't have to have titles and labels to be lovable. But again, we get caught up in this trap that if I have this label, somehow it makes me a better man. And I think we need to change that.
Yeah. Well, how do we change that? How would you change that? Because on the other side of that coin, there are men who have those titles, who have that power, and they say, hey, you know what? I've got a degree, so I am better than you. I have a PhD, so I am better than somebody with a GED. So how do we change that?
Well, that's what this work is about. That's what men's work is about. It's about bringing men together. And I've done workshops where you had men with PhDs and men with only GEDs and come together and recognize, oh shit, we're still the same. It's really about, and I think you mentioned it earlier, about vulnerability. It's about saying, you know what? I'm okay not have, for example, I only have an 11th grade education. I don't have a PhD. I'm not a doctor. I don't think I'm better than somebody else because I've written 15 books, been on national television and all of that. No, I'm just me.
Yeah.
But this whole idea of titles and labels, it's something that we as men have to move past because, again, the guys with the PhDs, get off your freaking high horse thinking you're better than someone just because you have a degree.
Right.
Nothing wrong with degrees. Get education. That's great. But stop using that as a way of being superior to someone else.
Right. And I'll add to that for our military listeners. If you're an officer, that doesn't make you better than an enlisted service member, an officer. I don't know if you know the military at all, Michael, but there are plenty of officers who believe that they are better than the enlisted service members, and I am here to tell you, you are not. So I'll just stop there. But we're all human beings, and you are enough as you are, and you are no better than anybody else. So there you go.
And that's the lesson right there. And last but not least, illusion number 5. To be a man, you must constantly compete with and try to outdo other men.
Wow.
Definitely seeing that.
So you just mentioned about you and your truck seeing another truck going, oh shit, that's a nice truck, right?
Yeah.
So we have this idea, and it's an unwritten rule that as men, we're always trying to one up each other. Here's a perfect example, right? So I worked in this hardware store. This guy comes in, wants to buy a grill, really expensive grill. So I sell this guy a grill. It's got all these gadgets, right? A couple of days later, his neighbor comes in. He says, hey, you sold my neighbor a grill. I'd like to buy a grill just like it. I said, great. So we go in. I show him. I explain all the functions. He says, now, I need my grill to have something his grill doesn't have.
Wow.
And so I sold him some little feature, and he says, I'm not going to use that, right? I just want my grill to be better than his grill. And that's a perfect metaphor for what we do as men. We're always trying to one up each other and compete against each other. I say, stop it. It's time for cooperation now. It's time to say, you know what? You got yours, fine. I'm okay with that. But don't try to, one up me by saying, you're better than because you have more stuff.
And that again comes down to insecurity. I me's all comes down to like it's a form of measuring contest, right?
It's also trying to find meaning from without and getting external validation to validate who I am as a person, right? Instead of activating from within. Much harder to do, right? And but when you do, it's like it doesn't. You just don't compete as much. It's definitely I mean, I'm a definitely programmed in the society from a young age. So now I'm like deprogramming in my later life, because it just, I mean, it's just what I want to do, because I want to get away from those shame cycles. I don't want to get away from the external validation. I want to get away from that pecking order. I want to get away out of that, conquest. I want to get away from the competition and just realize, like, hey, we're all men having our own kind of experiences, also having our own similar experiences. And when I can really, stand who I unapologetically be who I am, stand in front of a group of people, and not give a fuck what they're kind of like, thinking or doing whatever, but just really be with them, not from, the outside, you know what I mean? Like, oh, look at my watch or my shoes or my car, or like, look what I've done, look how many women I've slept with or something like that. But just be there heart to heart, right? And man to man, from the heartfelt man, things really start to change. And a lot of what I've seen, when you step into a situation like that, people begin to disarm. They stop competing with you. They stop talking about their sexual conquests. And then what happens? They begin to open up when they see that you're available and you're disarming them, and maybe they'll actually start opening up and to maybe the help that they might need. I mean, it's all there, but instead of it being about the mind and the programming of the mind and just kind of continually reliving generation after generation, right, of just those myths that and illusions that you've been talking about, Michael, like we can work from the inside out. That's why Jon and I do this work. That's how we have the meditation courses. That's why we're continually being students of this work, because of how incredibly empowering it is, not just for us, but for everyone we come in contact with. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, because ultimately it really boils down to one thing for men.
Yeah.
And for those who are watching, I'm going to give you the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Here's the secret sauce. Self-love.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
When we get to a place where we know who we are, we've done our inner work, heal those wounds, move past traumas and all of that, and get to a place where I can say, I love me just for who I am, not for what I have, not for what I can do. And I can stand in front of a group completely vulnerable. This is just me. Love me or leave me. Boom. That's what joy comes from.
Love it. And I tell you what, I don't know if I can think of a better place to end the show right there. I mean, that is it's super empowering. I will ask you one more question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. But those 5 illusions, incredibly powerful. Thank you for sharing those. And I know that in this day and age, we talked about evolving men, but there's something also that's kind of keeping us from evolving, and that's social media, right? We look on social media and we see all the people with the money and the cars and the houses and the women. And I'm going to talk to our men who are listening, and our young children, young boys who are listening. For you, those of you who are fathers, we have to teach these lessons that this is not what makes you a happy man. What makes you a happy man is exactly what Michael just said. That's self-love. Beautiful place to wrap it up. But I do have one more question for you. You talked about therapy. You've talked about practicing mindfulness. How does therapy help men, and how do we get past that? Oh, therapy is for the weak, right? Yeah. And then how has practicing mindfulness helped you?
Well, first and foremost, therapy literally saved my life.
Thank you.
Because I had gotten to a point where it was either get help or die.
Wow.
I gained the courage to go to therapy. Now, fortunately, I didn't drink alcohol or do drugs, or I would have been dead a long time ago. But my kids were the reason I gained the courage to go to therapy. Because when I was contemplating taking my own life, I thought what it would do to my kids if I did that.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And it just broke my heart to even think of the pain they would have felt losing their dad, because my kids and I are very close. And so as a result of that, I gained the courage to go to therapy, to start looking at, because I possibly had the worst childhood you could ever imagine. Every imaginable type of abuse I experienced between the ages of 7 and 13. It was awful. And so I had to be willing to unpack that trauma. And what therapy did was allow me to do that. It allowed me to let go of all those childhood wounds that I had been carrying. And unfortunately, what had happened was I mentioned the feeling of shame. it was that feeling of toxic shame that had actually driven my success. Because for me, it was my way of saying, look at me, I'm successful. Look, see what I've done. I've done this, and so I had this image that I put out there, right?
Right.
Successful manager, whatever. But it was covering up all the pain. And it wasn't until I went to therapy. It wasn't until I went to therapy that I released that pain, let that go, and got to that place of self-love.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And the second best thing that I've done after therapy is learn to meditate.
Oh my God. This is not a commercial. We did not ask Michael to say this. Thank you, Michael, for saying that. Yeah.
Because here's the thing. This is how Michael Taylor sees it. Meditation is the practice and mindfulness is the result. So when I meditate, I become mindful. And in becoming mindful, I become aware of what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling in the moment. And again, it has saved and changed my life because I used to think so much. I'd get these thinking headaches because I couldn't shut my mind off. So learning to meditate for me, again, after therapy, the second most powerful thing I've done.
I love it, man.
Amazing.
Beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah. I just want to say one thing. You talked about shame, and what is shame is the power behind those five illusions we talked about. 100%. Right. I mean, that's where it all comes from, because all that external validation and doing those external things. So look like it's like it comes from a place of shame. Wow. And thank you, Michael.
What we're going to have to do, gentlemen, we got to have another conversation about 5 masks of masculinity.
Oh shit!
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. We can go on all day. We'll have you. Yeah, thank you, Michael. This is fantastic. Wonderful, Jon.
Well, what's for Michael? What's for our listeners, for our community? What's the best way for them to find you and find your books, find your website, find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, to follow up on this conversation, go to anewconversationwithmen.com and you can download a free ebook of the 5 illusions. Very powerful ebook that'll give you some insights and go a little bit deeper into what we're talking about. So anewconversationwithmen.com.
anewconversationwithmen.com. There it is. Fantastic. Well, Michael, this has been fantastic. We like to wrap it up with the closing practice. So hope you would join us and then hang tight for a few seconds after we say our goodbyes and do the final closing, and then we'll wrap it up. But for our audience, hey, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you. Thanks for sharing the show. Thanks for tuning in. And I hope that you all will join us as well in this closing practice. So much like we did at the beginning, and as Will said, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if it's available to you and you feel safe doing so, we invite you to do so. Otherwise, just carry on what you're doing. And let's just bring our attention to our breath. We're not even going to force it. We're just going to notice it. Just like Michael was talking about, meditating can help you to be more mindful. And mindfulness is awareness of where you are, what it is you're doing, the space it is that you're taking up, the time that you're living. And just to do that, just tune into your breath. We're not even going to take any intentional breaths. We're just going to notice the physical aspects of our breath for a moment. The rise and fall of our chests and bellies. As we stand here, as we sit here, as we lie here, whatever it is that you're doing, just notice your breathing. And we'll wrap it up together with one deep, cleansing breath. Let's begin by emptying our lungs. We're emptying all the way, folding empty at the bottom. And then a nice, long, slow, deep breath in, filling all the way to the top, holding full at the top, and letting it go. And as you let go, bring some movement back into your body, rolling your shoulders, rolling your head, wiggling your fingers and your toes. Michael, thank you again, my brother. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate what you're doing in the world, what you're putting out there for men as a whole, for the future generations of men. Keep doing the work you're doing. Will, any last closing words to wrap it up?
Just big thanks to you, Michael, to the work you're putting out in the world. And get ready, guys. In order to increase this social and emotional intelligence, as well as to connect with other good men and realize that there's other good men out there, be on the lookout for the Men Talking Mindfulness Social Fitness Club coming your way. And that's a wrap, John. Thank you again, Michael. Appreciate
Michael,
you.
Thank you, brother. All right. Thanks, everyone. Until next time. Peace.
Peace, brother.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.